Hello again. Welcome to This Week in Media-ocrity, where we give you the best and the worst of the media. I'm your host, Joel Foster, and I'm unapologetically alt-center. Where do we begin? I guess I'll have to address the elephant in the room and talk about what's on everyone's mind. Infrastructure. Oh, no? Oh, race. Okay, I'll talk about race. You've probably all heard about this already, but the president's response to the violence last weekend in Charlottesville was a bit underwhelming for some. Trump said that the violence was caused by both sides and seemed to equate far-right white supremacy groups with left-wing counter-protesters. But before we talk about race, let's watch happy white people dance. Not me.
Oh yeah, here we go, break it down.
That goes on for 7 more minutes. I'm serious. So he looks like a happy guy, but who is he? This is Jack Posobiec. When we first met Posobiec in his debut, he was doing his best Al Pacino in Dog Day Afternoon impression. You might remember this from when Jack wasn't so happy. Let's take a look.
You are all Goebbels! You are all Nazis like Joseph Goebbels! This is Goebbels! You are all Goebbels! You are inciting terrorists!
Yeah. No one calls me a Goebbel. See what happens when Jack is a dull boy. But fortunately, Jack is happy these days. Let's see why.
And we now break your regularly scheduled programming for something unexpected and a little did not expect to happen tonight. Yeah, any idea what happened? Oh,
what did just happen?
I don't know what happened.
Wow. Wow.
Here.
Is this real?
Come on.
Is it real?
Sit down.
Is it
So,
like...
come here.
Did I see it right? I mean...
I was like, why am I getting so many notifications all
So
of
what
this?
did just happen? Can you just explain what just happened?
Why don't you explain? Why don't you break the news? Why don't you get the scoop?
I get the scoop?
You're going to give you the
All
scoop.
right.
I'm going to give you the scoop.
So...
Give you the scoop. What's the scoop?
All right, they're taking too long. I'll give you the scoop. Jack Posobiec was retweeted by President Donald Trump. That's it. That's what the celebration is about. His mail-order bride must have been so happy for him. But what was the tweet about? Let's hear him describe it.
And the tweet, here's the thing, guys. The tweet is, I said, meanwhile, it's actually a very serious tweet. And so I don't want to get too excited about that. It's pinned on my Twitter account, but it's actually very serious, okay? It's a serious tweet because meanwhile, 39 shootings in Chicago this weekend, 9 deaths. No national media outrage. Why is that? I'm not saying that they shouldn't have reported on Charlottesville. Don't get me wrong, but I'm saying there's no media outrage, no national outrage about that.
This is the only story they're covering. That's it. This is the center of their attention. Charlottesville is just dominating the news. They have blown this story to such a level that it lost completely the scope of it. How huge the media made it is just unbelievable.
That's right, it was about Chicago, which has become the far-right's version of Sodom and Gomorrah, or Adam and Eve, or Cop and a Half. They constantly talk about Chicago as if you can't enter the city without a bodyguard. I'm sure many of you have been to Chicago. It's a great city. Sure, there's crime, but it's constricted to a relatively small area. And Chicago isn't even near the top in terms of murder rates. The top 3 cities with the highest murder rates last year were East St. Louis, Illinois, Chester, Pennsylvania, and Gary, Indiana. Chicago didn't even crack the top 30. In fact, Youngstown, Ohio, where Trump held a rally just last month, was number 19 on the list. So what's with the obsession with Chicago? Well, there's a couple things. First of all, Obama's from there, and Trump is committed to a scorched earth campaign to make sure Obama is more hated than mosquitoes waiting in line in the movie Daredevil. But it's also because Obama's from there. So Posobiec deflected a violence problem within the far right world onto the left-wing black world. And that seemed to be the theme this week. But I felt a little bad. Let me explain. Because Jack has been trying to distance himself from racist hate groups for the past month or so. And this turned out to be a bad week to be supported by the president if you're trying to distance yourself from hate groups. Because Jack Posobiec couldn't even bask in his glory for a day before this happened.
I didn't wait long. I wanted to make sure, unlike most politicians, that what I said was correct, not make a quick statement. The statement I made on Saturday, the first statement, was a fine statement, but you don't make statements that direct unless you know the fact. It takes a little while to get the facts. You still don't know the facts. And it's a very, very important process to me, and it's a very important statement. So I don't want to go quickly and just make a statement for the sake of making a political statement. I want to know the facts. If you go back to my, in fact, I brought it.
Oh, he brought it all right. So in this press conference, Trump is trying to defend his statements from the day before when he said that there were two sides to the violence in Charlottesville. So he's trying to tell us that he wants to get all the facts before he makes a statement. Does anyone else find that ironic? Because Donald Trump has basically made a career out of making statements without getting the facts. Remember blaming climate change on China? Or remember when just hours after an attack in London, he urged Londoners to panic before he'd gotten all the facts? Or when he accused Kristen Stewart of cheating when we all know Robert Pattinson had a thing for Anna Kendrick? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he tends to jump to conclusions. Just yesterday, Trump tweeted immediately after a man plowed his car into a crowd of pedestrians in Barcelona, Spain. He cited General John Pershing, who, according to urban legend, used pig's blood to shoot militants when he was stationed in the Philippines. The story isn't true, but the point was that Trump was implying that the attack was committed by Islamic terrorists before anyone even had finalized that it was. They did end up declaring it terrorism, but there was barely 5 minutes before the news of the event broke out and the Trump tweet blaming Muslim terrorists. So holding him to the same logic, he didn't wait 2 days for the facts to come in on that one. But it doesn't matter, because he changed the subject anyway, which is usually what happens. Look how he followed that up by addressing the death of Heather Heyer, the girl killed at the rally. It tells you that he's the kind of guy who will talk about himself at a eulogy. Let's take a look.
Before I make a statement, I need the facts. So I don't want to rush into a statement. So making the statement when I made it was excellent. In fact, the young woman, who I hear is a fantastic young woman, and it was on NBC, her mother wrote me and said, through, I guess, Twitter, social media, the nicest things, and I very much appreciated that. I hear she was a fine, really actually an incredible young woman. But her mother on Twitter thanked me for what I said. And honestly, if the press were not fake, and if it was honest, the press would have said what I said was very nice. But unlike you, and unlike...
Well, I'm glad she could make him feel better. He's going through some tough times. And here's an even better attempt at changing the subject that doesn't exactly go as planned.
Unlike you and unlike the media, before I make a statement, I like to know the facts. They don't. They don't. How about a couple of...
Mr. Trump,
how about a couple of
terrorism, that
questions?
event? Was that terrorism?
How about an infrastructure question? Infrastructure is Trump's version of, how about them Yankees, huh? You could see he wasn't even buying it at the end there. He's like a little nervous. By the way, that's not a loop. He literally said, I want to wait for the facts about 15 times. But Trump did pull out one gem that went on to influence how the alt-right media would portray the events of Charlottesville and his response. Let's take a look at that.
Define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
no, define it for me. Come on, let's go. Define
Senator
it.
McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at it? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's statement.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do.
That's right, the alt-left, not to be confused with the alt-right, the alt-light, the alt-media, and alt-rock, a music genre so white that just listening to it is considered a hate crime. The alt-left describes groups like Antifa, who's been showing up to left-wing rallies and in some cases causing violence. We'll get to them later, because the alt-left term struck hard with the usual crew of Breitbart, InfoWars, and all the others. Here's Mike Cernovich, who now appears to want to blame the alt-left for everything, including his declining sanity. Let's take a look.
But the question that a lot of people are asking me is, how do I classify the Barcelona attack? Who was really responsible? And I think that this was an alt-left terrorist attack. The alt-left, I think a lot of people don't really know about, so we need to talk about the alt-left, what the alt-left is, what they stand for. So the alt-left is a nihilistic movement that is based on cultural Marxist ideals of deconstructing Western civilization. And by that it means they want to tear down all monuments and everything that is good.
Everything that's good? Like monuments? Admit it, before this week you never even noticed that racist monument in your town. Now it will haunt you forever in your nightmares, that weirdly gleeful expression. These guys had monument fever this week. It was also on the mind of Jack Posobiec, remember the tiny dancer from earlier? Well, EU organized a fake rally to take down a Karl Marx statue and attracted dozens, or 1 dozen, or 7 protesters to join him. But tearing down monuments is only an ISIS thing? I seem to remember us cheering that on when it happened, right? And what about comparing the alt-left to ISIS? Well, let's look at ISIS. They don't respect women's rights. They enjoy killing foreigners. They don't allow drinking, and they look down on anyone who doesn't follow their religion. Alt-left? Sounds like Pat Robertson. He would be in heaven with ISIS. But the alt-left meme was out of the bag and all over the alt-media, as the word spread that the alt-left was actually responsible for the violence last weekend rather than the white supremacists. Like this lady, the patriot nurse, who proves that you really shouldn't ever judge a book by its cover. Let's take a look.
The people who were mowed down were blocking traffic. They had just come from actively inciting riots, which is what Antifa and Black Lives Matter do. They are aligned with Socialists International. These people were advocating the overthrow of our system of government and the institution of one with policies and regimes that in the past century alone have been directly responsible for the deaths of 150 to 180 million people. The real espousers of genocidal ideology were not the people surrounding the statue of Robert E. Lee. They were the people who were walking through the streets, chanting Black Lives Matter, chanting F the police, and then promptly when people get mowed down, yell at the police saying, "Where the F were you?" So a little perspective on who it is. And folks, there's a lot of very soft people who are too quick to forgive. I want you to understand something, okay? If you have people who on your family line fought in the revolution, like me, then you will note that the people in the revolution fought and killed people exactly like the ones who are at these rallies saying, "Black Lives Matter."
All right. You know we're living in weird times when we've got racist hippies. That's the angriest hippie I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know which side to hate more. It's disarming. On one hand, she's excusing white supremacists. On the other, she's making me feel guilty for not eating meat. For eating meat. It's a wash. So she's saying that if this were the Revolutionary War period, your ancestors would have killed the protesters. Were your ancestors in the British Army? Also, if it were the Revolutionary War period, you wouldn't be able to express your views and put some clothes on. And also, black people were slaves. Do you want to continue with your Black Lives Matter criticism, or are you good? But one good thing happened from the events of last week in Charlottesville. It appears that the alt-right and the alt-light, which includes Posobiec and Cernovich, are starting to, I guess you could say, hate each other, since that's what they do. Let's have alt-right leader Richard Spencer explain the feud to us.
The other takeaway is that there has been a rupture between the, you could call them the alt-light, the new right, as they sometimes like to call themselves, rather stupidly, to be honest, or the Cernovich faction, or what have you.
No, you're lying. You're committing fraud right in my face. Don't talk like this. Don't get in my space. Don't put your hands on me. You're a dishonest person.
And the real alt-right. There is a huge rupture. I do not believe this wound will ever heal. And there are some major implications to that. But I am actually glad that this happened. I'm glad that the split took place, and it probably needed to happen.
You know, I'm glad this happened. This had to happen so I can grow. I don't need you to pay my rent or fight the globalists for me. I'll be better off alone. Sounds like Spencer is trying to move on from a bad relationship. And the opposite is true. Mike Cernovich tried to distance himself from the alt-right. Now he and Posobia call themselves members of the new right, or as Spencer calls them, the alt-light. Haha. I don't like to label people, to generalize and categorize them into groups. So I'd like to address Cernovich and the like as individuals. So I would call him an opportunistic piece of dumpster fungus. Because like dumpster fungus, Mike Cernovich grows where there's trash, because he feeds off of that trash. And the only way to destroy that fungus is to be clean, which means to be peaceful. Which brings me to the alt-left. Has there been violence in the left? Sure. By now you all know about Antifa, who are like straight-edge kids who grew up listening to Skrillex rather than Earth Crisis. There was the infamous incident of Richard Spencer being punched in the face. You probably remember that. The incident went viral and there was a lot of celebrating and sneering, and honestly, I was one of them. But you realize over time that it's stupid and it's not productive at all. You evolve. But the violence pretty much comes pretty sporadically. There's been tons of more peaceful rallies than there have been violent rallies. Even the Occupy Wall Street protests, from where Antifa sprung, went on for months but had a minimum of violence. So a few isolated incidents doesn't make a movement. Antifa, or the alt-left, or whatever you want to call it, is like the drunk guy that shows up and ruins the party. Yeah, that guy. You didn't invite him, but he somehow found a way to get in. But you only get him to leave when you run out of beer, right? So basically, we need to run out of beer. And what I mean by that is we need to stop giving them fuel and supporting them. They're taking keg stands out on the porch, and some of us are cheering, chug, chug, chug. Is there a problem with violence within the far left? Probably. Is there a problem of violence in the NFL? Absolutely. From Ray Rice assaulting his girlfriend on camera in an elevator to Michael Vick's dogfighting, a week doesn't go by without a professional football player being arrested for a violent offense. Just this year, we've already had 5 NFL players arrested for assaults. But we're not blaming the NFL for ruining America, unless you're Colin Kaepernick. And comparing the alt-right and the alt-left in this instance doesn't really make sense. The big difference between the two is that the alt-right organized the march, which was called Unite the Right. If Antifa planned a march, then about 30 people would show up and it would still end in a brawl. I would never go, not because I disagree with them, but because I can't do all black. I look like No Face from Spirited Away. Very white. And the truth about the Antifa guys is they're ninjas. Ninjas kill people, we know this. I don't understand why we're surprised with any of the violence, but if I could have a minute alone with Antifa and whatever the alt-right, alt-left might be, I want to just have a little chat, so excuse me for a moment. Hi Antifa, how are you? Look, I know you're passionate, I don't doubt that, and you're committed to your cause. I can respect that. But could you stop? It's just that you're making us look bad and you're making it really easy for the media to make the left look violent. It's really difficult to accomplish anything when people focus on the violence. It just repels people, like it or not. So why not instead join up with the larger peaceful resistance movement and channel that energy into canvassing or phone banking or starting your own voting organization? What you're doing isn't changing the system because there's like 40 of you. And to be honest, you're putting the minority members of your group in danger because they're more likely to be charged with serious crimes while the white members will likely just get hit with disturbing the peace. No one really seems to like you that much. But I do. You've just got an image problem. And it's not your fault. You meant well. It just got a little carried away. Wearing a mask is cool. Look who wears a mask. Batman, wrestlers, the Gimp from Pulp Fiction. If I had the chance to wear a mask, I'd probably do it too. But it's just not working. Speaking of not working, while I've got the alt-left's attention, I'd like to speak to George Soros, who's apparently in charge of all you guys. Hi, George. How are you? You've got some nice friends, George. I've been to plenty of left-wing rallies over the years. I was at the march last week, and honestly, I didn't do much. I just walked and then drank a beer. And sure, maybe I was just going to get a beer anyway, and then just thought there was a parade and followed it. But I was there. I'll get to the point. George, I'm broke. So if maybe you could cut one of those protester checks for me, I'd really appreciate it.
Yes.
I fell behind on rent a few months ago, and I'm now staying behind a Circle K at night. Just a little of that protester money would help. 100, 200, hell, even $50 would work. I'll march, I'll speak, I'll wear a ninja outfit. I love ninjas. Ninja Gaiden's my favorite game of all time. Anything, just, you know where I stay. All right, that's all the time I have for this week. I'll see you same time, same place next week, this week in Media-ocrity. Have a great weekend. Stay cool, Tucson.